On 1st February 2003, NASA's Columbia space shuttle was returning to Earth. 7 astronauts were seated in this shuttle, one of whom was very special for India. Mission specialist Kalpana Chawla. These astronauts were returning to Earth after spending 2 weeks in space. Their families and friends were waiting for them with bated breath. This flight was special for all of them. But for NASA, it was a routine flight. Because this was the 28th flight of the space mission Columbia program. At 8:44 a.m., the space shuttle re-entered the Earth's atmosphere. The systems were working as expected and everything seemed normal. On the Earth, in the Space Center, Charles Ohobo was the capsule communicator. He was the person communicating with the space shuttle. After a few minutes, Charles Ohobo talked to the astronauts in the space shuttle about the readings of tire pressure.
Yeah, Houston, we see your tire pressure messages and we did not copy your last.
Instrumentation, Max.
On the other hand, Mission Commander Rick Husband was answering that suddenly the line gets cut. They only hear one word from him, Roger. His answer remained unfinished.
Those are also
Charles Ohobo tries to establish communication again, but there was no answer from the other side. 10 minutes pass. The attempts continued, but there was still no answer from the other side. This NASA team in the Space Center was unaware that there was an explosion in the Columbia space shuttle. A few minutes later, the Kennedy Space Center gets a call. Switch on the TV and watch the news. Such scenes were seen on the news.
They've lost contact. We can only hope that what we're seeing is not the worst.
If anybody knew what just blew up going across Nacogdoches. I saw a fireball.
Some people on the Earth looked up at the sky, and this is what they could see. As if a comet was falling to the ground. A blazing light. It broke apart into 2, and broke into more pieces. The scattered pieces of this blazing light were falling to the ground. At 9:12 a.m. in Texas, the pieces of this spaceship were falling from the sky. By then, NASA had realized that something disastrous had happened. A few hours later, President George Bush addressed the country.
My fellow Americans, this day has brought terrible news and great sadness to our country. The Columbia is lost. There are no survivors.
All 7 astronauts were killed and one of them was a 40-year-old Indian-born American, Kalpana Chawla. A woman whose story became an inspiration for the whole country. Let's know her story in this video. Kalpana Chawla was born on 17 March 1962 in Karnal, Haryana in a conservative family. Her parents Banarsilal Chawla and Sanjoti Chawla came to India from Pakistan during the partition. Kalpana was their 4th and youngest child. When she started going to school, she was not formally named. At home, everyone called her Montu. So when the need arose, she chose her name herself Kalpana, which means imagination. At that time, no one would have imagined that this young child would go on to do amazing feats in her life. Her brother Sanjay Chawla says that her struggles with society began since her childhood. I will show these boys, I am not a silly girl. Sanjay says that she was a very determined girl. Imagine the year 1960. In Haryana, even today, a male child is preferred in many places. What would have happened in those days? Kalpana Chawla was interested in space after seeing planes flying in the sky. In her childhood, she used to go to the local flying club with her father. Her parents started noticing her interest. But when she grew up, her father and her professors and teachers advised her not to pursue this profession. There was nothing for girls in this career path. Sanjay Chawla says that it was a big shock for everyone. Everyone tried to discourage her, asking her not to do it. But no one could stop Kalpana. From Punjab Engineering College, she completed her bachelor's degree in aeronautical engineering. And then she went to America to complete her master's degree at University of Texas. Even though her father was disapproving of her decision to go abroad to study.
I lived in India in a very small town, and forget about space, I didn't even know if my folks were going to let me go to the engineering college.
Later in 1988, she did her PhD in aerospace engineering from the University of Colorado. She was 26 years old at the time when she started working at NASA's Ames Research Center. Her specialization was fluid dynamics of aircraft. That is, studying how the air flows like fluid around an aircraft's wings and all around. She had several pilot licenses. She knew how to fly airplanes, gliders, and seaplanes. In 1991, she became an American citizen. And in 1994, NASA selected 20 out of 4,000 applicants for astronaut training, one of whom was Kalpana Chawla. After 3 years of training, in November 1997, Kalpana went on her first flight into space, the Columbia program flight STS-87. In this space shuttle, she orbits the Earth more than 250 times. She stayed in space for 2 weeks. STS's full form was Space Transportation System. This was the official name of NASA's Space Shuttle program. This was the 4th program that had human space flights. The first was Project Mercury, then Project Gemini, and then the most famous Apollo program, and then this program, which started in 1981. This was the longest human space flight program in history, which ran till 2011. Here, NASA's focus was on reusability. To launch the same space shuttle again and again, so that there was no need to build new space shuttles every time. There were 2 main space shuttles used in this program. The first was the Challenger and the second was the Columbia Space Shuttle. After the Columbia disaster, Discovery, Atlantis, and Endeavour space shuttles were also used. You can find these in museums today. Among all of them, the Columbia was the first space shuttle to go into space in April 1981. It had completed 27 successful missions before the disaster. Now you might be thinking, was it safe to use a shuttle so many times? Was this the reason behind this disaster? The answer is no. The STS program was designed specifically for reusability. After every flight, there was a long process of inspecting, repairing, and refurbishing the shuttles. The actual reason behind the Columbia disaster was a minor reason. We will discuss this later in the video. But as a concept, there was nothing wrong with the STS program. The 24th flight of the Columbia Space Shuttle was Kalpana Chawla's first space flight, STS-87. In it, she was the mission specialist. She was the main operator of the robotic arm of the flight. Her job was to operate a robot arm in this flight that would deploy the Spartan satellite, a satellite that would be sent to study the outer layer of the sun. But during this mission, something happens that shakes her confidence. This 1,360 kilogram satellite goes out of control and she was unable to retrieve it. After 3 days and a spacewalk, the satellite had to be brought back. But later, NASA scientists congratulated her and praised her. University of Texas magazine says that many senior astronauts had told her, "Casey, you did a great job." It turned out that it wasn't her fault but someone else's in the shuttle crew. Because of this successful mission, Kalpana became the first Indian origin woman to go to space and the first South Asian American woman. The then Indian Prime Minister Inder Kumar Gujral had congratulated her.
Mr. Gujral, I hear you loud and clear. How do you read me?
Kalpana, we are proud of you, each one of us, who has done such a pioneering work.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very
How
much.
Kalpana was feeling when she went to space for the first time? She had this to say. When you look at the stars and galaxy, you feel that you are not just from any particular piece of land, but from the solar system. That is, before a city, a country or a continent, we humans belong to the Earth and the solar system as a whole. This flight lasted for 16 days and ran many other scientific experiments too. Like, it was observed how plant reproduction works in microgravity. But more interesting were the experiments that were done on her second and last flight before the crash. 16th January 2003, 10:29 am, Columbia Space Shuttle leaves the Earth for the last time. This mission was originally planned for 2001 and it was delayed 13 times. Finally, in 2003, it was launched from Kennedy Space Center. Mission STS-107 had 7 astronauts in total, led by Commander Rick Husband. The payload commander was Michael Anderson and 3 mission specialists, one of whom was Kalpana Chawla. The pilots were William McCool, and from the Israel Space Agency was Elon Ramon, who was a payload specialist. The mission of these astronauts was to conduct non-stop experiments for 24 hours. For 16 days, when they were in space, they carried out around 80 experiments in life sciences, material science, and fluid physics. Kalpana Chawla was focusing on microgravity, how combustion happens in space, how fire can be suppressed, how crystal growth happens, and even how prostate cancer grows in space. Without going into too much detail, this was quite interesting because when cells grow in laboratories on Earth, they grow into dimensional monolayers in culture dishes. But in space, cells grow in 3 dimensions in the shape of spheroids. Similarly, cancer tumors are formed in our bodies. This helped us understand tumor behavior. In this mission, a company called SpaceHab collaborated with NASA, with the help of which universities, companies, and government agencies all over the world could conduct their research in space without going to space themselves. It meant that these astronauts were doing experiments on their behalf. In fact, children from 6 schools in Australia, China, Israel, Japan, the USA were chosen who wanted to have these astronauts run their experiments. Spiders, silkworms, organic crystals, fishes, bees, ants, how do they react in space? Children wanted to know these, so experiments were being conducted on it. An interesting thing about flowers was discovered in these experiments. The smell of these flowers on the Earth changes in space. Because even during the mission, the data was constantly being transmitted to Earth. Approximately 30% of the data from these experiments was saved, collected, and kept in the ground stations. Some videos of the successful experiments were recorded, which were then sent back to the children, like the ones about ants and crystals. However, there were more than 40 experiments from which we were not able to retrieve any data due to this incident. By the way, an interesting thing here is that there was a live group of roundworms which survived this disaster with minor heat damage because they were kept in aluminium canisters. After the disaster, the broken pieces of the spaceship were recovered. Among them were 5 to 6 cans, in whose petri dishes these roundworms were still alive. The missions later on, like in 2011, the second last mission of the STS program, Space Shuttle Endeavour, some descendants of these roundworms were sent on that mission. But now let's come to the biggest question of this video. What was the reason behind this incident? Did the pilot make a mistake? Or did some other crew member make some hasty decisions? Was it the fault of an astronaut? The truth is that these were not the reason. None of the 7 astronauts in Colombia made any mistake. And even 3 to 4 minutes before the accident, none of them had any idea about what was going to happen. Watch this video recording.
At hundredth of a G. This is amazing. It's really getting really bright out there. Yep. Yeah, you definitely don't want to be outside now. Like we did before.
This is from a few minutes before the accident. The astronauts were laughing and joking. Kalpana Chawla is also saying something. It was only at 8:58 am that the astronauts got an indication that everything was not going as it should be. Colombia's backup flight software showed some messages on the display to let them know that 4 wheels on the left side of the space shuttle has lost pressure. And this warning came exactly 1 minute before the time when Colombia lost the signal to the Earth. The Capcom on the ground was trying to communicate about this. Now how would it feel if I said that although the astronauts had no information about this, some people in NASA knew about this problem? Not just a couple of hours before the accident, but 16 days before. They knew this when the shuttle was launched. The thing is that after 81 seconds of Colombia's launch, a small piece of foam separated from the shuttle and collided with the left wing. This foam was used to connect Colombia's external tank to the main shuttle. It was not a big piece. It was only 60 centimeters long and 40 centimeters wide. It weighed only 750 grams. But it hit the left wing with so much velocity that the velocity is estimated to have been between 700 to 900 kilometers per hour. 2 to 3 days after this incident, some NASA engineers asked ST's program manager Ron D. Dittemore to take pictures to examine the damage that was caused to the space shuttle. They could have used their American spy satellites. But the engineers said that the chief refused this request. This is why when this was later found out after the incident, in April 2003, he resigned from his position, acknowledging his mistake. In 2008, the book by space journalists Michael Cabbage and William Hardwood Comcheck stated that the Department of Defense was ready to use its spy cameras, but the officials refused. An internal commission was formed to investigate this, which was named the Colombia Accident Investigation Board. In short, CABE. In August 2003, this commission released a thorough report in which it was explained in detail why this Colombia disaster happened and what caused it. This report mentioned NASA's negligence again. NASA's human spaceflight chief William Reedy's failure to accept this offer of using spy satellites to monitor the damage to the shuttle. This is why the damage was not investigated, and this mission went on as planned for the next 15 days. Until 1st February, when the mission was over, and the space shuttle had to return to Earth. The damage on the left wing of the space shuttle caused a small hole. As it descended into Earth's atmosphere, the damage became even bigger. Because of the small hole, air began to leak, and normally there is a thermal protection system that maintains the temperature inside the space shuttle. But due to the air leak, the hole became larger, and as soon as it happened, a piece of insulation as big as a suitcase broke. A significant portion of Colombia was now exposed to external fire and gases. Because of this, the sensors in the left wing stopped working first. The temperature readings weren't available. Then the tire pressure readings disappeared. And just like that, the spacecraft started to break apart into pieces. The people on the ground capture this video, in which bright flashes are seen. A small piece of foam caused this incident, and 7 people lost their lives. However, it is important to mention that the report of CABE in 2003 stated that such foam strikes happen regularly during space shuttle launches. The photos from the launch of 79 missions that were available showed that such foam strikes had been seen in 65 missions before. Such foam strikes were very common. But the problematic part about this foam strike was that this piece hit the wrong place at the wrong time. 5 years after the incident, another report was published in December 2008. Colombia Crew Survival Investigation Report. This showed that due to the disruption of cabin pressure, the astronauts passed away within a few seconds. When the Columbia space shuttle was disintegrating violently, they did not have to suffer any heat or damage. This report tried to reconstruct the crew's last minutes. What happened in those last minutes? Warning signs and alerts were ringing all around. There were problems with tire pressure and landing gear. This report also stated that even if the cabin had better equipment, the astronauts could not have been saved. The breakup of the crew module and The crew's subsequent exposure to hypersonic entry conditions was not survivable by any currently existing capability. After this incident, NASA stopped this space shuttle program for 2.5 years. And most importantly, the design of the foam ramp was also changed. The design was changed so that an incident like this would not happen again. And thankfully, till now, even 20 years later, such an incident was not repeated. The space shuttle program was continued until the International Space Station was functional. In July 2011, when it was finally wrapped up, 135 missions were carried out under this program and it had run for 30 years. In these 30 years, 14 astronauts lost their lives in unfortunate accidents. And one of them was Kalpana Chawla. India lost its pride. But Kalpana Chawla's impact is seen in the lives of millions, directly or indirectly. Kalpana was so passionate about science education that she wanted every girl in India to get such an education. This is why she convinced NASA that at her secondary school in Karnal, Tagore Bal Niketan Senior Secondary School, the students from there could participate in NASA's Summer Space Experience program. Since 1998, every year, this school sent two girls to Houston, America, for the Foundation for International Space Education's United Space School. And Kalpana Chawla used to invite these girls to her home for dinner. NASA paid tributes to Kalpana Chawla and other crew members in the last few years. Like NASA's landing on Mars, that place was called Colombia Memorial Station. And there are many asteroids between Mars and Jupiter that were named after these crew members. This is why, today, somewhere far away in our solar system, an asteroid is orbiting the Sun, whose name is 51826 Kalpana Chawla. If you like this video, hit the like button and subscribe the channel for more videos. Thank you very much.